There are moments in pop culture history that feel seismic. Not just a big moment, but a before and an after kind of moment. One that splits time, changes everything. July 7th, 1996 was one of those nights. Because that was the night Hulk Hogan, wrestling's biggest hero, turned heel. But to understand why that moment hit so hard, we have to rewind a bit. We have to go back to a time when wrestling was still in its comfort zone. When the World Wrestling Federation, the mighty WWF, was king. And when WCW, World Championship Wrestling, was fighting for relevance. Because before there was an nWo, before Scott Hall walked down those Nitro steps with a toothpick and an attitude, before Kevin Nash powerbombed WCW execs and coolly hijacked the show, there was a war brewing, and it all started with a television slot. Let's set the stage. In the early 1990s, WWF was dominant. This was the era of neon tights, cheesy gimmicks, and Saturday morning cartoon characters come to life. Think Doink the Clown, The Repo Man, IRS. It was over the top. It was colorful. It was everywhere. WCW, meanwhile, was the Southern alternative. It had roots in the old NWA territory system, boasting names like Ric Flair, Sting, Lex Luger, the Steiner Brothers, and the Four Horsemen. WCW wasn't flashy, but it was wrestling. Gritty, technical, slow burn storytelling. But to the average viewer, it felt a little old. Then in walks a man named Eric Bischoff. Young, slick, and TV friendly. Bischoff wasn't just thinking about improving WCW. He wanted to rebuild it from the ground up. And with backing from media mogul Ted Turner, he had the budget to do it. Turner, ever eager to stick it to Vince McMahon, gave Bischoff a golden ticket, a primetime slot on TNT. In September 1995, WCW launched a show, Monday Nitro, live at 8 p.m., every Monday night, the same exact time as WWF's Monday Night Raw. It was more than just a bold move. It was warfare. Live TV gave WCW a huge advantage. While Raw was pre-taped weeks in advance, Nitro could respond in real time and even spoil WWF results live on air. Bischoff took full advantage, and fans were suddenly glued to their TVs, flipping between channels. From the very first episode, which was broadcast from the Mall of America of all places, Nitro felt different. Bright lights, pyrotechnics, matches that felt unscripted, cruiserweights flying through the air in ways American fans had never seen. And then came the real power move, signing Hulk Hogan. By 1994, Hogan had left the WWF under a cloud of scandal and fatigue. His act had grown stale. Fans were moving on. But in WCW, Hogan was still treated like a god. He wore the red and yellow. He posed. He said his prayers and ate his vitamins. He even had a Dungeon of Doom feud that was cartoonish to the point of parody. But Bischoff had plans. Big ones. Because WCW didn't want to just steal attention. It wanted to steal stars. And in 1996, two major WWF names, Scott Hall and Kevin Nash, became free agents. They were tired of WWF's stagnant creative and saw opportunity in Turner's deep pockets. When Hall and Nash signed with WCW, Bischoff saw a once-in-a-generation opportunity. What if he didn't just sign them? What if it made it look like they never left WWF? May 27th, 1996. Nitro was live from Macon, Georgia. Out of nowhere, through the crowd, dressed in street clothes, came Scott Hall, a.k.a. Razor Ramon to WWF fans, swaggering down the aisle like he didn't belong. He grabbed a mic and said the words that would kick off a revolution. "You know who I am, but you don't know why I'm here." Boom, the crowd erupted. Confusion, excitement, realness. Hall didn't say he was from WWF. WCW legally couldn't, but the implication was loud and clear. He was there to take over. A week later, Kevin Nash showed up. Bigger, meaner, full of fire. The two of them, dubbed the Outsiders, began to wreak havoc. They interfered in matches, attacked backstage, and delivered promos with a swagger and realism that felt totally new. It wasn't just a storyline, it was an invasion, and fans were hooked. By early July, the Outsiders had laid down the challenge. A three-man tag team match at the next pay-per-view, Bash at the Beach. The Outsiders would face three WCW representatives, but their third man, their partner, they wouldn't say who it was. Speculation ran wild. Was it Lex Luger? Was Sting turning heel? Could it be someone totally new? No one expected what came next. July 7th, 1996, Daytona Beach, Florida. The match began with Sting, Lex Luger, and Randy Savage facing off against Hall and Nash. It was chaos from the jump. Luger was stretchered out early. It turned into a 2-on-2 battle. And then, in the final moments, the crowd erupted. Hulk Hogan, WCW's ultimate hero, walked down the aisle. Fans cheered. He slid into the ring. Hall and Nash bailed out. And then, Hogan turned. He dropped a leg on Randy Savage. The arena exploded in shock. People screamed, booed, threw garbage into the ring. He wasn't there to save WCW. He was the third man. He grabbed a mic and delivered one of the most infamous promos of all time. As far as I'm concerned, all this crap in the ring represents these fans out here. For 2 years, brother, I held my head high. I did everything for the charities and the kids. And the reception I got when I came out here, you fans can stick it. And with that, Hollywood Hogan was born. Hulkamania was dead. The New World Order was born. And wrestling had just been rewritten. After Bash at the Beach 1996, nothing was the same. WCW, once a traditional Southern-style wrestling promotion built on headlocks and honor, had just become ground zero for a full-blown insurrection. And leading the charge, a faction that wasn't just a heel group. They were a movement. Scott Hall, Kevin Nash, Hollywood Hogan. Together, they weren't just wrestling's bad guys. They were cool, unapologetic, sarcastic, real. They were the New World Order, and WCW had just become their playground. Immediately after forming, the nWo set out to hijack WCW from the inside out. They weren't asking for matches, they were taking them. They didn't wait for TV time, they interrupted. Hall and Nash called their shots. Hogan cut bitter, self-righteous promos that blurred the line between storyline and reality. And they started showing up in all-black gear, shirts with that now iconic nWo logo, spray-painted and stamped like an underground movement. It felt guerrilla. It felt dangerous. Everything the nWo did was chaotic by design. They attacked WCW talent backstage and in the ring. They filmed grainy black and white promos, complete with shaky camera and warped sound. They spray-painted nWo on championship belts, the ring, and even fallen opponents. It wasn't wrestling anymore. It was anarchy on national television. While chaos reigned on the screen, things got even more interesting behind the scenes. WCW president and executive producer Eric Bischoff, who fans had seen as a neutral authority figure, turned heel in late 1996, revealing that he'd been working with the nWo all along. This move made the nWo even more dangerous. Now they weren't just a faction, they were a corporate-backed coup. Bischoff started handing out contracts to nWo members, giving them more airtime, better treatment, and protecting them from consequences. It was total control, and the fans loved to hate it. As the months passed, the nWo grew. The Giant, Six, Buff Bagwell, Scott Norton, Vincent, and Conan. Ted DiBiase arrived as the financial backer. Even fake Sting made an appearance, sowing doubt and confusion in WCW's top star. The numbers advantage meant that nWo could interfere with any match at any time, and they often did. They didn't win clean, they didn't play fair, and it didn't matter, because they were in control. The more WCW resisted, the stronger the nWo seemed to get. While WCW burned, one man stood in the shadows. Sting. Once the bright, neon-painted face of WCW vanished from the spotlight, betrayed by friends, confused by imposters, and unsure who to trust. He disappeared after the fall brawl of 1996. When he returned, he was unrecognizable. Gone was the bleach blonde hair. Gone were the high-energy interviews. In his place was a silent, brooding figure with pale face paint, a black trench coat, and a baseball bat. He didn't talk. He didn't wrestle. He just watched. From the rafters, from the shadows. Fans didn't know whose side he was on, but deep down, they hoped, prayed, that he'd save WCW from the chaos. Nitro became the battleground. Every Monday night, it felt like anything could happen. WCW titles were stolen. Referees were knocked out. Matches dissolved into brawls. Commentary was interrupted by nWo members taking over the broadcast booth. The lines between WCW and nWo blurred. You couldn't tell if it was wrestling, a soap opera, or a straight-up gang war. And the fans, they couldn't get enough. nWo shirts flooded arenas. The catchphrases "too sweet" and "for life" caught on with fans. The hand signs, the wolf signals, the black and white merch. It became a part of the mainstream youth culture. From 1996 to early 1998, WCW Nitro crushed WWF Raw in the ratings. For 83 straight weeks, WCW was on top. The formula was working. Start with the cruiserweight matches to hook the audience, build tension with mid-card feuds, close the show with an nWo segment that ended in chaos. Every episode felt must-watch. Would Sting show up? Would someone else join the nWo? What insane thing would Hall and Nash say this week? Even casual fans tuned in. It wasn't even about wrestling anymore. It was about the cultural drama. By 1998, cracks began to form. Fans still loved the nWo, but they also wanted to cheer for their favorites. To respond, WCW introduced a split. The group divided into nWo Hollywood, Hogan's faction, and nWo Wolfpack, led by Nash. And suddenly, the bad guys were good? The Wolfpack had red and black gear. Their theme song was a certified banger. They were cool, laid back, fan-friendly. Wrestlers like Sting, Lex Luger, Conan, and Randy Savage joined the Wolfpack. And despite the messy storytelling, the fans were into it. For a brief moment, WCW had lightning in two bottles. Evil nWo Hollywood and the rebellious Wolfpack. And chaos in every direction. Meanwhile, over on the USA Network, WWF was heating up. Vince McMahon, once the clean-cut commentator, had become a character, Mr. McMahon, and he was now in a blood feud with the anti-hero of a generation, Stone Cold Steve Austin. The Attitude Era was in full effect. The Rock was electrifying. Mankind was putting his body on the line. DX was pushing boundaries every week. Slowly, Raw began to gain steam, and WCW's dominance started to fade. The nWo, still powerful, still loud, but maybe just a little stale. Fans started seeing the same beats, the same spray paint, the same run-ins, and with so many members, the faction had lost its original spark. By 1998, the New World Order was everywhere. They had the numbers, they had the merchandise, they even had the main events. But what they didn't realize was this: when you're the top dog, the only place left to go is down. The seeds of the nWo's eventual implosion weren't planted by their enemies. They were planted inside the group itself. Too many members, too many ego trips, too much of a good thing gone on too long. Let's break down how a faction that ruled pro wrestling and transformed WCW into a mainstream powerhouse began to unravel. The moment the nWo split into two rival factions, the mystique of the group started to fade. At first, fans loved the Wolfpack, red and black gear, cool entrance music. Wrestlers like Sting, Lex Luger, and Conan suddenly became babyfaces while still flashing the Too Sweet sign. That felt fresh. But Hogan's group, nWo Hollywood, still controlled the narrative. Too many promos, too many slow, ego-driven speeches, too many non-endings to Nitro's main events. The nWo had gone from outsiders to overlords, and the rebellion was no longer cool. It was confusing. Every week, people joined or defected. At one point, it felt like half the roster was either in the nWo or pretending to be. There was no contrast anymore. No clear good guys versus bad guys, just gray sludge. And when you make a rebellion the default, rebellion loses its edge. For over a year, Sting stalked the nWo like a ghost, silently watching from the rafters, swinging his bat, never speaking. It was perfect. A year-long build to an epic showdown. At Starrcade 1997, Sting finally faced Hollywood Hogan in one of the most anticipated matches in WWE history. It should have been a slam dunk. The hero returns. The villain falls. WCW reclaims its soul. But WCW fumbled the finish. Hogan dominated too much of the match. The controversial ending, a fast count that didn't actually seem fast, led to a confusing restart by Bret Hart, who had just arrived from the WWF. Sting's win didn't feel triumphant. It felt tainted. Instead of closure, fans got confusion. In the nWo, they kept on rolling like nothing happened. While WCW was juggling in-faction fighting and bloated storylines, WWF was surging. Every week, Raw was producing must-see TV. Stone Cold vs. Mr. McMahon was a cultural phenomenon. The Rock was becoming a breakout star. The Generation X was pushing limits and parroting WCW on their own show. WWF had learned from WCW's innovations, and now they were doing it better. In April of 1998, the unthinkable happened. Raw beat Nitro in the ratings. The Monday Night War had shifted, and WCW didn't know how to respond. Desperate for a new star, WCW turned to a former football player with zero wrestling experience but maximum presence, Bill Goldberg. Black trunks, no interviews, spear, jackhammer, win. He racked up an unbeaten streak, kayfabe 173-0, and fans ate it up. Goldberg was the antithesis of the overcomplicated nWo drama. He was pure, direct, a wrecking ball. On July 6, 1998, in the Georgia Dome, Goldberg finally faced Hollywood Hogan and won the WCW World Championship heavyweight belt in front of a raucous home crowd. It was the WCW's most watched match ever. The crowd exploded, a true passing of the torch moment. But WCW had no long-term plan. Goldberg's rise was powerful, but poorly managed. Within months, the momentum faded. In the nWo, they just kept mutating. The original nWo had magic, but WCW didn't know when to stop squeezing it. After nWo Hollywood and Wolfpack ran their course, WCW tried to reboot the faction multiple times. nWo Elite, nWo B-Team, nWo 2000 with a silver logo, featuring Bret Hart, Jeff Jarrett, and the now declining Kevin Nash. Each version got less interesting and more overproduced, less connected to fans. The cool factor was gone. The mystery was gone. And by 2000, WCW was a creative mess. Behind the curtain, WCW was collapsing. Hulk Hogan had creative control in his contract, meaning he could veto storylines and outcomes. Kevin Nash was given booking power and pushed himself too heavily. Young, hungry talent, Chris Jericho, Eddie Guerrero, Dean Malenko, Perry Saturn, Chris Benoit, all left for the WWF, frustrated by being ignored. Meanwhile, WCW storylines grew increasingly erratic. Wrestlers shooting each other mid-match, matches with no finishes, title changes that made no sense, and worst of all, David Arquette winning the WCW title as a PR stunt. It was chaos without vision. And the nWo, once the architects of the controlled chaos, had become the poster children for everything wrong with the company. By early 2001, the writing was on the wall. WWF was dominant in the ratings, revenue, and momentum. WCW was bleeding cash, overproduced, and creatively exhausted. Then, on March 23, 2001, the unthinkable happened. Vince McMahon bought WCW. And just like that, the war was over. In one final symbolic moment, WWF aired Nitro's last episode, with Vince McMahon on the screen, announcing the end of its competition. It was surreal, emotional. The last Nitro closed with a match between Sting and Ric Flair. It was the perfect end. And just like that, the nWo was gone. At least for now. By the time WCW folded in 2001, the New World Order, the very force that redefined wrestling's golden era, had long burned itself out. But even as the lights dimmed on Nitro and the nWo storyline sputtered to a messy end, its legacy was locked in. Because the nWo wasn't just a faction, it was a revolution, a marketing monster, a blueprint for rebellion in pro wrestling. And whether fans cheered them, hated them, or dressed like them in high school hallways, nobody forgot them. Let's talk about what they left behind. Black and white, blocky stencil font. nWo, nothing else was needed. The design was perfect, minimalist, aggressive, universal. It looked just as good on a t-shirt as it did in spray paint on a championship belt or flashed on screen with grainy VHS distortion. The logo wasn't just branding. It was a signal, a badge of honor, a threat. By 1997, nWo shirts were everywhere, sold at live shows in record numbers, knockoffs at flea markets, bootleg shirts at malls. Even teachers in the late 90s were sending kids home for wearing nWo merch to school. It crossed over. It mattered. Too sweet. The hand gesture heard round the world. Originally a backstage click symbol between real-life friends, Hall, Nash, Michaels, Triple H, and Waltman, the too sweet hand gesture, pinky and index fingers raised, middle fingers tucked, became the official sign of nWo brotherhood. Fans adopted it immediately. Wrestlers used it in the ring. Kids mimicked it on the playground. It became an underground salute, a wink to anyone in the know. To this day, modern factions like the Bullet Club, the Elite, and the Judgment Day flash it like gospel. It's a part of the wrestling language now. Too sweet isn't a catchphrase. It's a cultural artifact. Let's look at every major faction that's come since. The Generation X, leaned into anti-authority, but took a lot of nWo swagger. The Shield, dressed in black, came through the crowd, dominated on arrival. Bullet Club explicitly modeled their entire identity off the nWo logo, colors, gestures, structure. The Bloodline, long-term storytelling, backstage dominance, blurred family lines, and control. None of them would happen without the nWo first blazing the trail. The nWo showed the wrestling world how to build a group that wasn't just a gimmick, but a philosophy, a vibe, a self-sustaining machine. When Vince McMahon bought WCW, fans wondered, would the nWo ever appear in a WWE ring? In 2002, we got our answer. McMahon, furious at losing control of his company, in the storyline, declared he'd inject the WWF with a lethal dose of poison. Cue the video package. Cue the black and white. Cue the guitar riff. Hollywood Hogan, Kevin Nash, Scott Hall, together again. The nWo debuted in WWE at No Way Out 2002. Walking slowly out to the ring, flanked by confusion and nostalgia, fans went wild. But they also sensed that it wasn't quite the same. Hogan would quickly turn face again after the fans wouldn't stop cheering him. Nash would get injured. Hall would struggle backstage. The magic, it was still there, flickering, but the moment had passed. Still, seeing the nWo on a WWE stage felt surreal, full circle, a final exclamation mark on a wrestling era we never thought would end. In 2020, the nWo was inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame, with the original trio, Hogan, Hall, and Nash, joined by 6. It was emotional. By then, the wrestling world had changed a dozen times over, but those 3 letters, nWo, still commanded respect, still made fans lean in. It still felt rebellious. And then came tragedy. In 2022, Scott Hall passed away. The man who started it all. The man who walked down those Nitro stairs with a denim vest and a swagger that set the wrestling world on fire. The origin point of it all. Fans mourned. Wrestlers paid tribute across all promotions, and the Too Sweet hand signal lit up timelines and locker rooms around the world. It wasn't just about one man. It was about an era. Today, retro wrestling t-shirts are everywhere. But the nWo shirt, that's the starter kit. You see it on the WWE shop. You see it at AEW events. You see it worn by rappers, skaters, gamers, and streetwear junkies who weren't even alive in 1996. The aesthetic, grunge, rebellion, chaos, it's still there. It still feels dangerous. It still looks cool. WCW may be gone, but the New World Order is for life. There's a reason we remember this era so vividly. Because for a little while, between May 1996 and late 1998, wrestling felt unpredictable. It felt like the rules didn't apply, like anything could happen, and it just might. A wrestler might show up unannounced. A hero might turn heel right in front of your eyes. The entire company might get taken over by outlaws in black and white. That feeling, that electric tension, that's what made the nWo special. And even now, decades later, we chase that same energy. And new stories, new factions, new promotions. But we always come back to this. 3 guys, 1 night, a leg drop that changed history. This has been Retro Waved, the rise, reign, and ripple effect of the New World Order. Too Sweet for life.